All right, what's up YouTube? What's up internet? What's up team? How are we feeling? How are you guys doing? How's your morning? How was your morning, Akshat?
I don't want to explain.
Okay, let's not get into it. Let's say it's some health related stuff, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's quickly check the audio on YouTube, whether it's sounding good. Perfect. All right, so welcome to everyone here physically, but also to the ones online, to another week of Startup University. We get together as a team once a week to discuss foundational knowledge around what it takes to build a startup, important things to really understand deeply, to avoid mistakes, and just to help you and everyone in the team become a better startup founder in the ecosystem. Last week we also started a new initiative, which is the Acta University, where we are right now putting together an extensive course on startups and what it takes to build a startup. And today I want to start with the first lesson for us internally. It's basically a written essay module I've written down that I want to read out to you step by step and just discuss with more context along the way with some examples. And I would say along the way, you guys can ask questions. So if there's something unclear to anyone here from the team, you can just jump in, let me know, hey Luis, this is wrong or whatever. Like also challenge it, right? This is nothing I want to be just taken for truth, but rather question it from your own beliefs, from your own experiences and so forth. Yeah, should we just jump into it or anything on top of mind before we do that? Justus, you look a bit tired. Okay, perfect. Let's go. Okay, the essay or module for today is called the Startup Journey, where it's just a general overview of what a startup journey looks like. There might be some repetition from the past few weeks, but still I think it's important to reconsider these ideas again and again. And yeah, let's just jump into it. So the thing with startups is that they're unintuitive. Most of the things you learn in business school are not only applicable to startup, but actually harmful to progress. So today, I want to look at what the real startup journey looks like and so forth. By the way, I need to figure out whether I'm just going to read out like a weird, teacher or whether I just freestyle it along the way. I think I'm going to freestyle a bit more, but base it on the article. So first off, I want to define what a startup actually is. And the best definition I came up with, what a startup is that it's in a fundamental way solving a problem some set of people have in a better way than what exists today. So a startup is not about building from a fantasy or bold vision you have in your mind, but much rather a lot like more simplistic reality, which is just make something people want. And this is basically everything that you can break down around startups to the statement. As we consider maybe some of our ventures, if we go by the definition, solving an existing problem some set of people have in a better way than what exists today. How do you guys connect that to what we're doing? Maybe there's an example floating in your mind.
So the only people who don't build a venture, I think we showed on how this could work. I think there are people making content in this business startup scene about stuff, but there's still this problem of like many people do stuff but never show it to the world. But there are a few people, and I think we just went out and solved this problem to give insights, show the journey in a way that is done better than most people do it. Content.
Maybe let's also try to apply it to a more traditional example of how you think about a product, a customer, and so forth. So again, defining it as a problem an existing group of people already has, but solved in a better way. Maybe from Nova or Reflector, would you like to try to apply it to that?
I mean, maybe I'll start with something else and then I'll go into that later. For me, it's also this kind of leaves two options here. One being you solve a problem slightly better for a fuck ton of people, but what we kind of learned is also that it's better to like solve a problem for a smaller subset of people, but just significantly better than it is doing it the other way. I guess for Nova, kind of the way I see it at least is you have this option to kind of follow through with your goals using some productivity tools, but it doesn't really adjust to your life and it doesn't really get you the end result that most people want. I think that's exactly where kind of Nova comes in and kind of forms it around your life and more adjustable in terms of AI.
Sure, maybe just simply broken down, the existing problem people have is, well, they struggle with topics in life. The way they solve it today is going through a human coach, paying multiple hundred of euros every hour, you have a real coaching lesson. And we try to solve this problem in a new way by applying artificial intelligence to it. by giving you an app, because we believe, that's our hypothesis, this problem is better solved in a lot of the cases for this small group of people if you have your companion in your pocket all the time. So there's an existing need. We're not inventing something from scratch, right? At least from the problem. We look at the real problem and just try a better way to solve it. And this is how value creation happens. And I think the same can be applied for nearly every company you can think of. Yeah. Sure.
I have something about the approach which I really like, because you said about business schools that they really harm progress and teach something fundamentally wrong, or not wrong, but like different. And what I find interesting is that for a very long time there was this idea in the world that you need to build the perfect product, and then you can only go out into the world and share it and really sell it. However, there was revolutions with that there's a so-called lean startup. And I really like how you at Nova approach this, because this is basically the lean startup, not at perfection, but at a very, very good level, where you just put something out there, test it, have an MVP, get feedback in, and then actually build something that people want. And that's a really, really nice approach. And that combined with media is like a really, really nice blueprint for then to have like this kind of systemized way to build companies in the end. So we can go out there and build hundreds of ventures just with this strategy. And I think that's something that's really a bit different than business schools at least used to teach it. I don't know how they do it today, but it's more like, way faster and way more consumer based than just like, oh, I have an idea and I'm sure people will love it.
It's maybe a good transition to the next part of the module, which is why not to build from a vision. Yeah? The reason building from vision doesn't work is that in the vast majority of cases, your vision is filled with bias and a distorted view of reality. Too often do founders spend years building something to only then find out that no one wanted the thing you're making. You cannot force your will down people's throats. Thinking you can convince the world into your vision of a future doesn't work. So most often, when you hear some startup declaring this new and novel vision they're building, it's a sign of failure. It might be the illusion of success in the short run, but you shouldn't be fooled by that. The world works differently. Maybe to express it in a different way, the market pull is the strongest pull you get. You cannot win against the market, right? Just because you think, for example, it would be great to have a car that has a fancy LED animate, like, I don't know, some stupid feature because you think that's such a great vision, doesn't mean the market wants that. And in the end, it's really not about you and your vision and your brilliance. It's just about serving the market. And of course, there's novel ideas. There can be a product vision, right? Tesla has a strong product vision where they want to bring electric vehicles to the world at ultra low cost, and some other initiatives they're doing nowadays. But this is something the market already wanted. And maybe it was early, only, let's say 10 years ago, a small set of people wanted electric cars because, there was just a small market for it. But ultimately now, over the long run, we see that it was a right hypothesis. There's more and more people in the market who actually want that, and they're pulling the product out of the company almost, right? But it wasn't that sort of Elon Musk went down and said this bold vision and only I care about it, but no one else in the world, and now I am the mastermind who can convince anyone they should need that. It's something that rarely works, from my experience.
I can also maybe give an example for the masses. I think when Mr. Beast sat in his apartment about 10 years ago, he wasn't like, oh, I have this crazy vision of making this huge animated series where built $1 million studios, and then he just said, okay, let's do this, let's go there. But he became the biggest YouTuber in really narrowing one part that most people in content never figure out, is by really focusing, okay, what does work? What do the people want? What could I do that serves the people? What could I do to make the most people happy with my videos? How can I make them more entertaining for them? And this is how he created this insane followership and these insane videos. Not by following his ego and saying like, oh, we should do this, but focusing on what the people want. And I think this not only applies to startup, but to many things.
Quickly on that point, I think content creation is actually the best example for it. Because you can have, like we saw it many times, we have this nice vision for a video, oh, this would be so cool for us, but then you see maybe it's not so interesting to people otherwise, right? And I think the content creators also in the world are masters of that in a sense. They understand what a certain group of people want. Not everyone, because Mr. Beast is nothing my parents would watch, right? But they understand their small market, their set of people really, really well, and just serve what they want anyways, right? He's not manufacturing a new pseudo want, which doesn't exist in the market. So actually this is the best example, I think, to make it really clear.
Okay. So like I have two questions, and like it can be a little personal or biased feedback, but biased view. But generally to me, like it's really important. The thing I'm working on aligns with my moral objectives. So like sometimes in the market, people can want things which are not good. For example, Coca-Cola, maybe cigarettes. It might kill you, but people want it and people sell it. So how do you balance that if something doesn't sit right with your moral things, but market still wants it? Because market is not always right. We say consumers are right, but they are not most of the time thinking about their choices. Or like let's when you give example of Tesla, they also do false marketing sometimes. Like they promise self-driving or something which hasn't been around for years, but still they got people hooked. So if you still want to stay competitive but true, and focus on the problems which are really important, let's say climate change or something, where people want just coal for free and fast, but maybe solar is more expensive, it takes more time, but we know environment will not sustain that if we keep that pace going. So how do you balance that out and actually follow objectively value creating things? A little bit of the Mr. Beast example, maybe he is a very big channel, but I personally would prefer math videos or science videos or something which creates more value, I think, than Mr. Beast's random people going in a mall or touching a car for $1 million or something. Yeah.
It's a great question. I just want to be careful to not make this a too moral point about society as a whole, because we can very quickly take this and now question everything in Western society.
I have actually a very simple answer to that. You already answered your own question. It's just personal. It's personal preference, right? So in the moral type of sense, you could either sell cigarettes or you could do a product that helps humanity. It's just like your decision what you're going to do with the product. So maybe the question is not, oh my God, am I the right person? It's like, what product do you want to build? Do you want to help people, or do you just want to like get cash?
Yeah.
So maybe a few more points on that. So first off, I agree with that. It's your decision as a founder or as a person who wants to get active, what do you want to build, right? And there's no judgment from my side. Like I can say I prefer this over that, but it's my decision which type of company I'm building. However, I want to really stress you and maybe confront you on one point. We could all agree sugar drinks are bad, right? And we all say, well, this should not exist. And our vision of the world is no one drinking sugary drinks. And now we're going to build from this vision forward and think we're going to be massively successful. Yeah. But the reality of the market, these are the people, there is a real market need for it. People want it. There is an active want. And the reason why Coca-Cola is so valuable is because they're serving this want better than anyone else. Yeah. Next to many, many other reasons, right? But this is exactly the point with not building from a vision. Like, yes, there can be vision, and you can always say, hey, there's a small subset of users who want math videos or who want just sparkling water in a can. Sure, but this is going to be a different market size, for example, a different company you go after. And it's not about, I think, saying, hey, only go for the big market ones that are there. There's niche market ones, and we're going to get to it later, which are super interesting for you to create super valuable and useful companies, right? But the market, I think, undeniably for something like a soda can with a new flavor taste is like on the order of 1,000x smaller than for a Coca-Cola thing. And that's just the reality of the market, right? This is my take on it also. Yeah.
And again, I would still argue that those things aren't as fixed as it may seem, because in the example of Coca-Cola, it's not like people want sugar in their drink. People want sweet drinks, which taste good. So you can also use that to your advantage and just solve the problem in a different way, which is more aligned with your personal beliefs. Yeah. Did you want to say something?
No, it was the second part.
Just quickly pointing that out, that's exactly the existing problem or market need, but solved in a new way, right? And this is how new things get created. And also what I just want to clarify on this advice, it's really focused on building B2B, B2C tech type of companies. Yes, it applies, I think, more generally to the market and how you are an entrepreneur, how you build a product that's valuable to people. But yeah, you also had some more thoughts?
Yeah, so like generally it's way more difficult if you're thinking of customer feedback and not thinking of values, right? And like to stay competitive, it would take sometimes a general initiative from everyone. So like for example of coal, objectively we know the planet is gonna get destroyed unless we switch. But right now nobody cares. And if I go in the market and say, hey, my petrol is cheaper and you can fill your car instantly instead of waiting 5 hours to charge, that seems like a very good option to consumers. And now if I'm making electric cars, it's very hard for me to get customer feedback and convince customers, hey, buy electric car. It's good for environment. They don't care, right? They don't care. So it's like very hard to get good feedback and show them that, hey, this is the right way to solve the problem. When, if we are just going on based on, hey, do people want it or not? So, it's very hard to balance for me sometimes personally that, hey, this doesn't meet my objective or maybe moral alignment, but market says so.
And please, I don't want to go too crazy because there's so much more. Just one more thought. As startup founders, we need to see reality for what it is and not do wishful thinking. Saying we can internationally coordinate to say we need to do electric because coal hurts our planet whatsoever, there's a very low likelihood this happening. I think that we just see that's a reality on the ground. And I would say the opportunity for change is exactly now in the hand of a founder to create a superior solution, which might be electric, that's actually preferred to the old school petrol solution. And this is how mass change happens, because all of a sudden the market has an existing want. You're solving it in a novel way, which might align more with, also positive impact for the planet. And this is how large-scale change happens. It doesn't happen from our vision and our morals and our convictions. It happens, again, from the market, right? And this is how I think about also large-scale change. That's the only way you have a realistic shot at it. It doesn't happen just because we now think it should be different, yeah? Is it a really important point? Then we add it?
Yeah.
Okay.
I just wanted to address one point, which I found very interesting as one big important point in content. For whatever you do, there is an audience. And I think in startup building, if it's niche, if it's trying to save the world, whatever, you have to go past this bold view of everything and really narrow down. Electric cars, whatever it is, there are people who want this. You can make videos about hobby horsing and people will still watch it. For everything, there is a market. And if you really go down into this rebel road, you will find the people who give you feedback, and then you can move on from there. But yeah, I think many people get stuck on this bold vision of everything and never go deep into it. But I think this also applies to startup. To your next point, Luis.
Nice. Just for the sake of time, because we want to keep it to 30 minutes ideally, I'm just going to read the few next paragraphs. Next headline is how a startup works. The better way to think of a startup is to think of it as a research project. You are trying to find truth in the market, to discover a new way to solve an existing need or an unmet market need all along. The only source for truth for this is the market or physics, not your illusion of being brilliant. And the way you find truth is by coming up with your hypothesis, which you then test through real experiments and action, not PowerPoint slides or market research. Product market fit. While you're looking for truth in the market, you can think of this search as a search of product market fit. For a startup, there's two variables. One, the market you want to serve, which basically means a set of people in the world with some set of shared criteria. And secondly, the product you're building, which means the solution you're giving the people to a problem that you're building out. When you find the right product for the right market, you found truth, which is the basic condition for building a real company. And an important qualification for market fit is that the market you defined actively wants your product. If you're begging people to use your product, you're likely building in fiction land and not the real world. This might not be crystal clear from the start, but you're testing for early signs that inform your direction you should be going towards. So what I basically want to say, if you really need to talk people into using your product, this is typically always fails, right? You need to make the product so good, they desperately want it, they pull it out of your hand, and this is where you move from just a visionary idea which might work to a real company, right, that is working. I think you can see it in a lot of examples. For the sake of time, if it's really important, you can add it, otherwise we'll move on.
No, I just think because I heard you, I don't know where and what video, but you talked about Jamie and how you realized this pool after trying a few iterations, and then all of a sudden hundreds of people signed up and said, "Hey, we want this." This could be an interesting insight from an actual example from you.
Yeah, I mean, I think with name any tech company that you see today that is large, whether it's the Airbnbs, the Dropboxes, the Spotifys, whatever of the world. Let's take Spotify maybe. There was an active want for people to have your music while you're on the go. Like, we all like music. We had bad solutions to it, which was radio. I mean, decent solution, but still this was sort of the solution that existed. And now people are able to listen to their things wherever they go on Spotify. Sorry? iTunes was a period before that. It wasn't streamable. So the question was, there was iTunes before, exactly. There are incremental steps, I think, if we look at this. But just looking at Spotify as a whole, it basically had an active customer need. It just served in a better way. through a novel approach, which was subscription. You didn't have to buy, right? And having it on your phone on the go wherever you go, right? Really convenient. This is just one example of it. Then let's continue with the section before product market fit. Finding product market fit can take years. Most startups don't get there. And this is why so many fail. They run out of money before finding product market fit, which means something that works. Many startups started with one idea, but through iteration and looking for truth in the market, ended up building a completely different idea. The months before PMF can look weird, confusing, exhausting, and difficult. Because if you have adjusted your hypothesis 6 times already, you may start to doubt yourself. But this pre-product market fit time is something you cannot skip. And you must resist the temptation to go into execution mode before finding real product market fit. At this stage, everything that is not getting you closer to PMF is a distraction and something you should not be doing. This includes premature growth initiatives, hiring too many people, making fancy desks, or anything else that doesn't get you closer to finding truth in the market. I think we can all relate to that very much. So how do we find product market fit? In pre-PMF land, you're playing the game of coming up with good hypothesis, building the basic version of the product, testing it in the market, and learning from that. The more good iterations you do on your hypothesis, the better. The mechanics of it are simple. 1, come up with a hypothesis, which is a problem. B, who has a problem, and C, what solution you think solves that problem well for your market. Second, test your hypothesis by building the solution in the most fundamental way very quickly. Give it to real people and watch how they're using it or not using it. Talk to them. Third step, learn from the experiment by having a radical honest view on what people are telling you. Remove your preference or bias, but look at the real data. I think this is the loop we're going through again and again and again. I think also important to mention, when the benchmark in YC world in San Francisco a few years ago was in weeks you should ship a product, not months. The benchmark today, just because we have the greatest technology ever with AI, is actually days, not weeks, almost, if we're really honest. This is why Project Nova, for example, was something we said, hey, we have 7 days to build out the product. Maybe it took a bit longer and there's still some things we need to improve on. But this is ultimately the benchmark for the speed. And someone who's faster at doing good iterations of this will beat us, right? And this is why we need to obsess so much over speed. Weeks are actually not enough, days are, just to find out. And once you have market truth and you're convinced, hey, there is a pull, there is a thing, then you can make it really solid and make it better in so many ways, right? But this only happens after you have this initial PMF thing figured out. So yeah.
One question to that. I think in every decision based on numbers and statistic, there's one weak point, and it's the human. From your experience, I think it could be a common mistake that you attach yourself too much to the product. And when is the right time to like quit a project? When you say, okay, we did 5 iterations, you could say, okay, maybe these 2 people liked it, so let's do more. But when is the time where you say like, okay, maybe switch the whole thing up, maybe leave that idea behind?
Honestly, there's no one answer to it, because it's so situational to the context you're in, to the market you're building, what you actually learn from the iterations. So there's not this, like, if you hit this, then you should do it. This doesn't exist, I think. And I think many would agree. In general, the better judge, I think, of progress in that sense is just the quality of the iterations you make, right? If you're really learning with every iteration and you're sensing that you're getting closer to revenue from the usage data and so forth, this is a good sign. And what is also very true, like just emails or product analytics or numbers in that sense are not enough. You need to talk to people, and this is the most important thing. Like, it becomes a whole picture by also talking with someone. Like, hey, actually, what keeps you up at night when you think about organizing your company? What keeps you up at night if you think about your life goals, right? And from these conversations, you get those qualitative impulses and the intuition of what might the next thing be, right? So ultimately, it's really not a one-size-fits-all answer. I always think of it from iteration to iteration. And yeah, we'll talk about that more also in a moment. But really important question, of course. So next section, focus on a few people. It's bad to start building a solution for everyone because you're at risk of building a solution for no one. It's better to make something 10 people desperately want and need than something 1,000 people sort of like. The reason founders get this wrong often is because they have this false reality of needing to convince investors of a huge market you're going after that can be worth billions. But this is something that naturally emerges as you go. Because once you dominate one segment of a market, it's easier to go out and apply this to other segments. So whatever advisors and experts are telling you, ignore it. First, make something a small group of people desperately want and need. On a global scale, these tiny markets can already be worth many millions. If we look at PayPal, they started out with a really niche use case where just for eBay transactions, basically they solved this and they had, I think, 30 or 40% market share. And only after this, they expanded to become this payment solution for everything, right? They didn't start out by saying, hey, we're building for everyone. And this is what many people get wrong. And this is when oftentimes we get questions, right? Like, oh, so this can be used for everyone, right? Like, go after this. Yes, I mean, obviously we don't forbid anyone to use a product. Also, PayPal would probably back then not forbid anyone to use a product, but it's a question of focus. What are you focusing your product on? Your go-to-market, your marketing, all of that. And I think the most important thing is really dominate one segment, because then expanding to other segments becomes a lot easier. Then, okay, I'm looking at the time, but we'll go maybe a bit over time. But we'll try to keep it to the point. Pivoting. You can split the iterations you do into two categories. First, incremental iterations, and second, radical iterations. An incremental iteration if you change one of the following variables of your hypothesis. One, the additional market. Second, the problem you're solving. Or third, the solution to the problem. A radical iteration is when you change more than one of these variables at the same time. It can be referred to as a pivot, which is just another word for drastically changing your initial hypothesis. It's just a word we know a lot floating around. Pivot, you change something, but you really need to just break it down, actually level deeper on your hypothesis. 3 elements. What are you actually changing? Let's continue with after PMF. Defining product market fit is not a binary condition that is met. It's not either true or not, but rather it works like a continuous variable where you get incrementally closer to stronger PMF. While this is true, there is a clear line you can draw. Pre-product market fit, you're pushing up a rock, up a mountain. Post-PMF, you're running after the rock because it's rolling down the mountain. This can be formally defined as growth. The moment you're growing consistently every week in your North Star metric, which could be revenue, is the moment you have evidence for PMF. This assumes that your growth doesn't scale with the money you spend. So, for example, just running paid ads to increase the growth rate doesn't count. The dynamic of how you run a company shifts when you hit the milestone of product market fit. You move from research focus to execution focus. And now you start optimizing the different input variables to your business success. Importantly, the search for even stronger PMF doesn't stop. And this fundamental mindset will remain with you throughout the lifetime of the company. So there's not a switch, 1 or 0. You have PMF or you don't have PMF. It's just a question of how strong it is. However, I think there is a noticeable shift. For Jamie, the company we did, I can definitely tell you, we were in this before PMF land for 3 years or something, 3.5 years, until eventually we went on something where there was actually a pull. And things were still not perfectly working at the start, maybe, but there was a pull, and now it's really running after this rock. And you still want to improve a lot of stuff here and there, but yeah, this is, I think, the defining moment for every startup.
How did you see the poll? How did you see the poll?
So the question is, I just repeated for the mic, how did we feel or see the pull? The one thing was how the conversations went with customers. It was no longer us convincing them, hey, you should run your team with this feedback platform we were building, but they were actually, how can I use it? And they were more curious about it, and they were actually in the conversation, you notice like, hey, I want this now, right? It wasn't like, I need to convince you. Second thing I would say is word of mouth was really a factor, right? The moment one customer refers to the next one is the moment you know, there's really something to it. And I would say this goes together with a sufficient sample of it though. If it's just 5 people, I would still be a bit sus, but once you hit 100, 200, 300 people, and you really see this North Star metric grow without you spending money on marketing or anything, it's more like this organic pull. This was where we knew it's strong,
How did you reach people? How did you advertise?
In the beginning of the Jamie days, we basically just had intent-based traffic through Google, but also we did a few launches where we just went out on LinkedIn and kind of were hoping someone resonates with it. Cool. So 2 more sections, then we have it for today. Next one, ignoring advice. As motivated earlier, you should ignore nearly all advice floating around the internet. VCs, experts, professors, and even some set of entrepreneurs might be good at their job but terrible at giving advice for real startups. If you're lucky to have someone who has gone through that journey and understands why startups are so counterintuitive, they can help. Although you need to understand that you're the only person who is close to the ground truth, and an advisor cannot find ground truth in the market for you. Experiments beat opinions. And this sounds maybe counterintuitive because now we're giving advice on what works, but it is really true. If I read the LinkedIn articles every day that I see my feed, or on YouTube even, there's just so many people who use the word startup, but actually mean just a normal company, right? Technology startups, and this is the very special case of companies we're talking about, right? This, in the global scale, maybe just less than 5% of companies. I don't know the exact number, but it's probably a really small number of companies that are a real tech startup in that sense. the rules for them are really counterintuitive. And the moment you also read from some head of growth guy at a 100-person organization, this is way past PMF. The advice they share is not useful for a pre-product market fit company, right? Because the advice really changes for the moment you are in the life cycle of a company. This is why I'm really careful with that. The other point, I don't want to hate on VCs, but a lot of investors are those business people who have a nice business or finance background and now do this VC fund thing. And oftentimes I even see, let's say, people who are like 26 who worked at a VC fund for 3 years and now talk to founders as if they know exactly how it works. I can just tell you they could be further away from what it actually takes in the beginning, because they get good at pattern matching maybe some rounds, and maybe in 10 years down the line they see whether they made a good or bad choice, but it's so hard to tell. The moment a startup gets funding for a seed or Series A, this is not a milestone of success. The milestone of success is in 7 years down the line, whether they're still in business, whether they actually found something that really worked, whether they scaled rapidly to millions and millions in revenue, or got acquired because they were doing something actually useful. So this is why it's so easy that we have this false reality online with a lot of investors and VCs preaching advice. But in the end, if they haven't gone through the journey of really finding product market fit, I would not listen, because it is just so distinct, so different from everything else you learn in business school. Yeah.
I don't know if you can match it, but I think it matches. Right in the beginning, it's so much about the founder or the person behind the thing, because you talk to the users, you develop the ideas, you get behind it. And I think this is also why Acta is such a good company, focusing on the people, because especially in the early stage, there will not be this messiah coming to you and saying, this is what you need to do to find product market fit. You have to find it out yourself. And really helping those young founders getting there. Acta.
Cool. So I'm just going to shorten the last section I'm going to read. It's the following. Capital is not the input factor accelerating finding product market fit, given you have capital to work on your startup full-time, pod qualification. Better iterations, better experiments, and better hypotheses are, and the speed at which you execute on them. These are really the things that matter for the speed and the quality of product market fit you find, not capital itself. So success for a startup looks like this: talking to a lot of people, identifying a real problem, building a magical solution they love, and iterating until you end on something customers are pulling out of your hand. You don't learn to build a startup by reading about it, just like you don't learn how to ride a bike by reading about it. It requires you to take real actions and go through the reality described above. The next module and so forth. So this is a realistic overview of the startup journey. I would be curious, what is one thing you take away from this session? Everyone can just reflect for a moment. What is the one thing you're taking away from the last 30 minutes that maybe was a surprise to you, that was counterintuitive to you, something that reinforced a given belief you already had? What is like the delta you walk away with today?
I think it hardened my belief that it all comes down the line from doing stuff, and the faster you do stuff, the better you get at doing it. And if it's user conversations, finding out if the content works that you push, at the end you just need to do stuff. And I think most people, first of all, don't do stuff, and the second group of people do stuff way too slowly because they overthink stuff or want to hit perfection and not ship whatever they're doing. And I think especially for us on the media side, it's just about doing, because we see traction once we do it, even if the work isn't perfect, and we can develop from that.
I think on my end, what it kind of reinforced was this thinking of trying to find product market fit, and ideally I wouldn't even need 100 people on this waitlist. I could have 10 people on the waitlist, hand it over to 10 people, and if next week it's 15, that's how I know I'm onto something, not because 100 people are using it now. That's not the point. And the same goes with, it's not like how much money you have or like how big your team is or something, which would be a measure of success. The only thing which would be a measure of success is what my customers are saying, how many times they refer to other people and all this. So that's all I would focus on.
I think, like, especially if you take in what like Lewis said, a lot of these things, they are not really like set in stone. Like, it's not you're in this stage and you have to do this thing next, right? It's a lot about like working on your ego, like working like on your ambitions and being like able to say, okay, this is where I am right now, this is what I have to work on. Because again, I think for people who work in media, it's like very, you get a strong signal right away, right? Like each piece of content you upload, you get some feedback, you get like views, you get new followers, so you get a signal of where things are going and how to deal with that. But especially if you're in engineering, and again, like the revenue you're going to make is going to come from all the products we're going to make. It's about like figuring out, okay, like we're at this stage right now. I know this works, like, and figuring out like sort of how you take in the information. You get tons of feedback, tons of like things, but how you work with them, right? You don't want to just do your own thing, have a really high ego, and then lose yourself in a very like highly technical product that doesn't sell. But at the same time, you don't want to like get stuck on one piece of feedback and then sort of develop the product into like a crazy direction that might just work for like a single person.
Yeah, for me, it's pre-product market fit. Life will not be good. It is not gonna be glorious. It's not gonna feel good. Yeah, and like I think product market fit is going to be a point where software is kind of spreading itself a bit. So you give it to 5 people, already you have 5 more people coming. So software is doing the work itself because we identified product market fit. Yeah, it's just that.
I want to quickly reflect just a few thoughts while I was listening to all of you. I think really good takeaways. Like there's examples where companies are scaling a product that doesn't have product market fit with a lot of marketing dollars, right? And the phrasing I like from Silicon Valley is the money you spend on marketing is sort of the tax you're paying for not making a remarkable product. And it's not fully true. You also need marketing and distribution, and product doesn't sell itself from day one. You need to still find the first people and so forth. And it's an illusion to say, hey, from day one we already have one customer brings in 2 customers. This doesn't happen from day one, right? There is just a period before that. However, the core thing we also try to do every time is focus on product first, because this is what allows us to grow exponentially over time if we get this right. And it's important that we don't get confused by the illusion of some company raising a lot of money with a mediocre product, which we also see a lot in the AI stage right now, where there's a lot of products where I'm personally like, I never used that thing before. They announced like a Series B at crazy valuations. I'm pretty sure retention, everything is horrible if you look at it a level deeper. So this is just one thing I wanted to also add on, because the word really creates this illusion sometimes of what it should look like versus what it really is. But it just all comes down to what kind of game you want to be playing. Yeah, it's just some thoughts on that as well.
I think for me, actually everything just deepened my knowledge. I just feel way more safer on the opinion I already had on product market fit and all that. And as well, I think it was a great sentence from Johan that as an engineer, maybe you, or as a tech startup, you have to get a lot of insights very quickly, just as it is in content. I mean, you are directly getting the feedback from the market. And as an engineer, you tend to like overcomplicate things and maybe just working on the product as before you even pull it out to the world or push it out to the world. And my favorite sentence of the whole session was probably experiments kill opinion or beat opinion. Is it someone knocking the door? And that's my probably favorite sentence from all the session.
Perfect. Joe is running to open the door because I think Uber Eats arrived. But we're going to end the stream shortly and wait for Joe to also share his thoughts. 9903. Perfect, guys. But some good reflections. Also, Johan, the thing which I really resonate with is it is a bit messy, right? There is no clear path. It's just true, you know? We can just do our best to clarify the process behind it in our minds, right? To optimize the way we execute. And I think this clear thinking of hypothesis is really important. Also, what I really like, we now define the missions very clearly, right? Where we really try to say, hey, why, what, success, and what's the scope? And this forces us almost to think about the clear terms, hey, where are we in the stage, and reset a bit, so we don't get stuck for 6 months just working, and are really reflecting what we're trying to learn at the moment. Okay, closing word from you.
I don't know what was all said now, but basically what I learned, not just through today, but also through the past few weeks, which was already kind of living in my head, but not really internalized yet, is that the largest importance lies really in communicating with the market, communicating with people. Because I found myself in the past often trying to build a company, but just getting lost in pseudo work, actually. Like I thought I was building something, but in the end I was just having ideas, writing them down, conceptualizing them, writing down maybe business plans or something else, but never ever anybody has seen anything I tried. And that's when you think like, okay, that's where you sentence really hit perfectly. You try to chase perfection without even like just putting it out there and showing it to the people, which to me now is the most important thing as I see it, because Elias has weekly feedback calls and really communicate with the market, and then also ask the right questions. That's important. You don't fool yourself with like adjusted questions that will kind of confirm your belief in a bias. Yeah, exactly. And yeah, so communication, showing your work.
Great. And I would even exchange the word market and pre-PMF land with just a group of people. This is all you're trying to do. If you cannot get 10 people to really love and pay for your product, you should not think about 1,000 or 10,000. It's like a necessary step you need to take. But yeah, cool. I think it was a good overview across what a startup journey will look like. For the ones who are watching online, thanks for watching. We're going to link the article below from the Startup University. And one more thing before we end the stream, Justus. We're back next week, same time, and we're going to talk about the most common mistakes founders make, which I think is going to be really interesting for us and relevant for us. So for the ones watching, thanks so much. See you.